Hi, this is Sean Murphy of SK Murphy. I'll be the moderator for today's PATCA webinar on expert collaboration. We're fortunate today to have Dr. Alex Garcia Topete. He's a writer, filmmaker, entrepreneur, researcher, and consultant. He brings more than 15 years of experience working in creative industries in Mexico and the United States. His research and expertise focus on transdisciplinary intelligence and collaboration methodologies, particularly as they relate to the creative industries and their relationship to technology, value creation, and social impact. Alex.
Thank you, Sean. And let me share my screen because I did prepare. So the talk will focus on 3 areas. Please feel free to ask questions as we go on the chat. I like these talks to be interactive. At the same time, sometimes I may say, just hold on for 2 minutes. I will get to that in a couple of slides. So yeah, we'll talk about the relationship of knowledge and expertise. They're not the same thing. They are very close together. The framework of transdisciplinary intelligence that helps to understand and get a collaboration on a good foundation, and how to get to the actual pointers of expert collaboration. So knowledge and expertise. There's an interrelation between knowledge and labor that turns into expertise. The more you work on a thing, the more you get to know about it and the new knowledge that you acquire. And as these two get into this feedback loop, the more you build on the expertise on an area of time. And the more you collect these areas of expertise, you start building an industry. That is the basic framework to be thinking about when talking about expertise. We are all experts of different areas. We come together as a group and association so that we can come to a common ground, which is an important part of building the collaboration process. As industries grow, they become ecosystems, and they become the building blocks of how the world works. We have the creative industries, entertainment and art. We have science, obviously, medicine, engineering, that creates the infrastructure in which we exist. And we have the things that are more in the sociocultural areas like finance. But all knowledge is collaboration. There's the intersubjective, so the knowledge that we have by just interacting with each other. There's a connective type of knowledge that we get from just being in the world, that we get to start gathering pieces of. We're not all finance experts, but we have to have a bank account. We're not all finance experts, but we have to do taxes. So the bits and pieces that we start collective, and then there's the dispersive type of knowledge that is just how it starts, how bits and pieces start going into different areas of industry, of expertise, and of our lives as individuals. Knowledge is always collaborative, as I already stated, because, for instance, 2 + 2 = 4. Some will say it's a universal truth. It's mathematical. There's no way around it, but it's only knowledge if we all agree that these symbols mean 2 + 2 = 4. Otherwise, it's just scribbles on a piece of paper that then have no sense and no attachment to any sort of reality. And with knowledge comes power, as some would say. And it starts with specialization, which all of us here have, the professionalization, which the association accomplishes, and then it becomes a discipline that, in our case, it applies, but at the same time, it's more for specific areas of knowledge. But the truth is that discipline has different meanings. It can be organizational departments within an organization, such as a higher education institution or just a company. It's the branches of the tree of knowledge. So science, art, the things that spark in our minds when we say those things. It's just communities of practice of just like the association is, and cultures, because each of these have a particular way of thinking, of managing symbols, of talk, of having a language. Um, think of, for instance, when we talk about lawyers, there's a specific archetype of the lawyer that comes to mind. And that's because they have a culture. You can think of the language that they use, of the things that they're going to care about, the values. So the point of an expert collaboration starts from understanding that there are these differences in perspective that come from the culture that is ingrained from the knowledge that we have. A scientist doesn't think the same or see the world the same way an artist does, or the same way an entrepreneur does, or the way that a doctor, uh, speaking of medicine, a medic does, or an educator. Um, so this takes us to transdisciplinary intelligence, the framework that I propose of understanding that all of these cultural dimensions of our understanding of the world from the expertise that we hold, knowing that that is going to permeate not only our view of the world, but how we interact with others and how others interact with us. There are several ways to see it. There's multidisciplinary, where everybody brings a piece of the puzzle. There's cross-disciplinary, when everybody has to reach across from different departments, from different fields. And there's the interdisciplinary, where everybody has to truly come together and make the parts function dependent on each other. And then there's the transdisciplinary approach, where we all cross communities of practice, communities of stakeholders, we cross even sectors of society, and have to integrate what we know into a functional version of expertise. As I said, disciplines are and have cultures. This can be broken down into values, symbols, text, rituals, language. Um, there's difference in how somebody might say that what value means. Um, if you come from finance, it's going to be dollars. If you come from a more social impact entrepreneurship, it might be how many lives you affect with what you're doing in a positive sense. Um, in my research, I've come to find that there are 7 distinct meta-disciplinary cultures. And I'm not going to go too deep into this right now, because this is plenty of discussion. We can, if anybody wants, in the Q&A portion. But basically, everybody sees the expertise that you hold affects how you see the world, what you care about in it, such as systems and processes, or the natural world, or just value creation. The methods that you choose to accomplish their goals. It affects the values that you hold and things that you believe are important or useful. And it affects what type of product comes out of your actions, the outcomes. And collaborating among the different disciplines requires that you know at least the basics. It's just like when you want to go abroad for a while.
Could you show the slide a little? Could I go back? I didn't finish reading.
Can you repeat that, Stephen?
Could you show the previous slide a little? I hadn't finished.
Yes.
Thank you.
So in the sense, think of it like going to a different country. There's going to be a different language, a different set of values. And before you go, either you go wanting to learn on the go as you're there, but it's also recommended that you learn a little bit before you land, so that you don't start just going in and chewing gum in a country that criminalizes it. it's good to have that kind of cultural awareness. And in the case of disciplines, it also counts. One of the ways I like to make the point is that companies, transnational companies, don't grab a bunch of engineers from, let's say, from Argentina and Vietnam and Germany and the US and Brazil and put them in a room and say, come, go make me the next car, without checking, hey, did you all guys, speak English or have a language in common? They don't assume that just because they're engineers, they're going to be able to collaborate. And yet we kind of expect that from people in a company, that just because they're part of the company, they're going to be able to collaborate when they have very different backgrounds, particularly in the area of expertise. And it's good to think about it at the individual level of what is the background that you have as an expert and what others will have, to think it in the collective. So if you're part of a team, what colors of the rainbow, so to speak, are covered by the team? So if you have an entrepreneur, the marketer, and chief finance officer, and creative from marketing, what might be missing from that team and the viewpoint if you're trying to reach out to the audience, to an audience or a customer segment? Maybe you're trying to reach out to schools because your product is aimed for higher education or students or school educational organizations, and yet you don't have an educator in your team. That's gonna affect how you might be able to not only design the product, but reach out to the target demographic, to the target market, and communicate the value of your product. Here's an inventory of the different areas to take into consideration. It can get very complex very fast, but this is a way to break it down in what areas you already match when talking about collaborating with others. So things like the collaboration style, the character strengths, if you share a language, if your goals are aligned, and even if your processes, policies, and procedures match. It can be the case that you need a lot of documentation and your collaborator never writes anything down. So that down the line can be a very, very rough position to be. So this inventory is all the areas that you need to think about and in a way discuss with potential collaborators. Now let's talk about expert collaboration. Because a team of experts does not equal an expert team. When we go for an expert team, it means that these are people that are particularly attuned. Thanks, Charles. Yes, the advisory board can be indeed a place for diverse input from people active in the field. That is a perfect example of a functional capacity of a team of experts that is positioned to create value by sharing their expertise, and that over time they become an expert team collaborating with each other. You know what everybody is supposed to be contributing. You can anticipate your others' perspectives. You get to work together. This comes from a extensive research in particularly in the military, in healthcare, and in transportation, that teams of surgeons that have worked a long time together, teams of flight crews that have worked a long time together, military units that have worked a long time together, get better at anticipating and being able to adapt because they know each other and the reactions and strengths and weaknesses of each other and how to, complement each other on the go. So what is the steps or the experience of expert collaboration? It starts with curious, imaginative speculation. It literally starts with somebody asking, hey, maybe we can do something cool together. If that is not part of the spark that starts the collaboration, maybe it was something that was assigned from management, or it was just an opportunity, a happenstance. You might want to ask the question or try to foster a way to be curious about the perspective, because it's gonna play back a lot during the downstream. Because, for instance, there's a curious anticipation. It's part of the idea of maybe we can work on something that is valuable to both of us. And that is going to require to reach out, to talk it through, to come to a consensus. That is going to require also time. Collaboration to get to a level of expert doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen overnight. It requires time. It requires communication and being able to communicate effectively. When here it says communicative interactions, it means that everything you do in a collaboration has meaning. If you miss to reply to an email for a week, it can be interpreted as, oh, you are ignoring you're unreliable, or you're ignoring the project, or simply, oh, this person is overworked. If they know you in anticipation, your collaborators, they're going to know what is the correct answer to that. But if they don't, they're going to fall back on their own biases and their own expectations that might not have been expressed before. And this connects to the faithful collaboration. You need to be able to authenticate, to use a different word, that they are working for the same alignment of values, for the same goals, for the same reasons, or at least the reasons that you know that they are doing it for. You don't have to be perfectly aligned on everything. You can agree that the value that one collaborator gets and the other one gets are different, but that the way to get there is shared, and it's easier to go together than to go apart. So without that type of corroboration, you might be acting in parallel, but not really together. It requires performative multi-stability. Hold on. Before I go to that burning question, to what extent don't the standard personality sorters predict these personality types, communication styles, mismatches? I'm going to assume that is for the disciplinary perspective, the disciplinary cultures.
This slide as well, the collaboration. So some people are asynchronous, some people are real time, some people thrive on talking, some people like messaging, some people like going and thinking for hours and writing a memo, all that stuff. How do you integrate that into, or do you? Is it relevant? Maybe it's not relevant.
No, it's absolutely relevant. The main point, it's not so much the what are the specifics of them, as much as the awareness by the entire team of what those are. So that the expectations and the planning and everything can be aligned. And I like to use more than aligned, I like to use attuned. Thinking of an orchestra or a jazz ensemble, that you know when to play, what to play, and you are riffing off each other because you know what the basis is supposed to be. It's hard to be able to riff up with someone with someone if you were expecting a trumpet and they come back with drums.
Sure.
So being clear, like, okay, I like to work asynchronous. You like to work real time. Let's come up with a way, with a workflow that accommodates both, so that we can be both at our best. If we work only in
Right.
real time, you're probably gonna dislike the collaboration. If we work only on asynchronous, I will probably not be at my best.
Sure.
So the
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the actionable part of my question is how do you read the person's style, personality very quickly, and you figure out in like 30 seconds or 5 minutes, like, can I work with this person? Am I compatible? Am I going to crash and burn? Is this going to be a disaster? You're probably very, very good at it, but many of us aren't.
Well,
do you have any? Maybe that's a separate thing. Maybe you want to come to the end.
no, I actually developed a format of a memorandum of understanding that if you go through it and fill it out in a 15-minute meeting with someone, you will
Yeah.
be able to at least hit the big items, and organizing a little bit of like, oh, we're gonna clash in, if you figure out that you're gonna clash in 10 out of 12, maybe you want to rethink the collaboration. Or, I mean, you can go knowing that those things are gonna be not problematic if you don't let them. But that's part of the communicative interactions, as Lester pointed out, that if you are clear on where everything is coming from, it helps increase the understanding, even if there's not full agreement on it, if that makes sense.
Sure, but I'm not trying to disrupt your flow, but I was thinking of sort of engineering examples for me. I mean, I once had the displeasure of working with a VP of marketing, and when his attitude to project planning was sort of wishful thinking, like sales will magically produce paying customers even though we don't have a viable product. The chip is going to fab and yield even though nobody's invested any time in that, and we're assuming that happens on the first wafer, which never happens in semiconductor. Customers will magically appear and give us money even though our offering is inferior to our customers, and so on and so on and so on. And eventually the company crashed and burned, but I should have just walked away because his entire brain was wishful thinking. But his compensation package was such that he was incentivized to go around saying this, but the rest of the team, he was pretty much selling the team down the river. So, there is such a thing as too much creative in a certain position. Like some positions require less inspiration, more determinism. That's just my comments. I'll leave it to you.
No, and that segues perfectly into the performative multistability. That in a true collaborative environment, not one where everybody is in the same room but working on their own rewards and incentives that are completely misaligned, completely out of tune with the rest of the collective. There are changes in roles. Performative multistability refers to being able to sometimes a different person than the designated leader of the group might take the lead to keep track of the project. In an area of design or a phase of design of a project, you probably want the designer of the group to take the lead, not the CFO that is going to be dictating, that might be dictating numbers instead of the actual functional things for a product or a process.
Sure.
So expert collaborative groups are able to switch chairs in the role, so to speak, in things like leadership, or be agile in terms of problem solving and who's going to have the answer and who can take the lead if somebody drops out. So that is part of the challenge.
Sure.
And not every collaborative group accomplishes to get to the expert phase because they are not giving enough time. The company crashes and burns. The leadership did not allow for the dimensions of
Sure.
collaboration that would benefit. Which
Yeah, but
takes me.
equally, there's such a thing as too much brainstorming and too much hamstring. Like, this was a startup that was burning through the investors' cash, and the executives were sitting in the boardroom brainstorming about stuff that they would sell 7 years in the future on non-existent technology. So I guess I'll just stop talking. Paraphrase what I'm saying is, the thing I learned is, after talking to this person for 30 seconds, 5 minutes, do I get a big warm fuzzy about the relative level of attention to detail, creativity, reality in the plan? And if I don't, it's not compatible. Anyway, Sean is making some really good comments.
So why don't we come back to that at the end, Stephen? I think you're got a case study, but Alex has got a pretty rich model here. I'd like to let him walk around, and then we have time to explore it. So.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, we'll come back to it. And going to subjective multidimensionality, that means being able personally to, it's a little bit about empathy in this part. Being able to position yourself to the perspective of others, to go beyond what you already know. It's the scientist that can think a little bit about the world like an artist, or the artist that thinks of the industry more like an entrepreneur. That sort of just going a little bit over the edge, gaining a little bit of insight from the perspective other than yours, that can really enrich not only the collaboration, but the outcomes, particularly in things like an enterprise where you're trying to reach out to customers and be able to figure out what their needs are and meet them with something of value. And throughout all of this model, the persistent knowledge exchange is key. So in terms of if somebody withholds information, if somebody doesn't share or doesn't accept the knowledge that is being given out of the collaboration, it's going to fail. Everybody should be taking in what collaborators share, what collaborators contribute. Otherwise, it's not a collaboration. It's just a facade to have somebody take the blame when failure comes. And ideally, expert collaborations have multimodal outcomes. That means that it's not just one thing that gets done successfully, but actually several. It's not just the product that gets made, but it's you get the product and the campaign and the plan for improvements later on. It's always more than one item that gets built out of these expert collaborations. And just in a nutshell, if you take anything, just one thing from this talk, it's that expert collaboration requires curiosity and respect for each other. If you devalue the contribution of your collaborators and just consider them the help, the collaboration is going to be, it's not going to be a true collaboration. It's just going to be mandated labor with a with parallel processes. You need to have awareness of your own background, how that affects your perspective, and that the background of the others is going to vary, and it's going to very much inform how you collaborate. And that goes for their expertise, their professional background, their professional experience, because if they come from different industries, they will have different preferences and different vices even. It's going to require attunement. It requires that you get to know each other, that you come to terms in places that you are different. And if that difference is going to be complementary or contradicting, and it requires that you be able to communicate both explicitly, and that you communicate well with what you do and not do. And four, most importantly, that I cannot hammer enough sometimes with people, that it's going to take time. Sometimes you meet a collaborator that you speak the same language, that it's just magic and you complement each other. I have experienced that in my background in film. I have experienced that in some of my research experience, and in some of my business experience, but most of the time it takes time to be able to get to the point where you can riff off each other, that you can anticipate what they're going to do, that you can be forgiving even when something goes wrong, and you get to learn together. And with that, we can open the discussion.
So I had a question for you. At
Yeah.
the very beginning, you made a strong distinction between team of experts and expert team. Could you give me a couple of criteria or a way to look at that? How do I tell, do we have an expert team? Are we a team of experts, or are we on our way to expert team?
Sure. Team of experts is everybody is going to be highly knowledgeable in what they're doing. They can be, let's use a surgical team as an example, since it's one of the things that has been researched the most. You can gather the best operation, I can't remember the exact title, but basically all of the nurses and support staff for surgery, the best 3 surgeons in the country, and the best anesthesiologists, and put them in a room. And chances are that it's like 85% chance that they're going to make a mistake, not necessarily fatal, but they're going to make mistakes during that first operation that they are doing together. Even though they are the best ones, they are the best top of the pack in each of their areas. They are not experts at working with each other. And that takes time, it takes repetition, it takes practice. The expert team gets to work faster, anticipate each other, just know that what is going to be their roles, their interactions, and how they can back each other up to prevent mistakes and to prevent pitfalls. One of the markers of having an expert team is when the members of the team can accurately justify, let's call it, the responses or behaviors of their colleagues. So if you're in a room and with the experts, and one of them is late, and somebody gets to say, oh, they're probably doing this, without being like, oh, they told me they were doing it, but rather as a guest, and they get it right. That is an anecdotal but very telling interaction of having an expert team. Synergy, yes, would be the word to use.
Thank you.
And it's not more than a magical ingredient, Luciana, I would say that it's the glue or the rhythm that develops over time. It's very rare to have it be magical just because everybody was in the room and they happen to collaborate well with each other. Carl, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just had 2 general questions from what you're presenting. One of them is, when you say time, it takes time, is that measured in years, hours, days, months? Because a lot of times engineering teams get thrown together pretty quickly. And I don't know how that would all work. Of course, one does notice that the team is either working or not working. Anyway, do you have any just general idea? I would think it would be months as a general time frame.
In my research, I found that it's almost a what's the word I'm looking? It's a percentage of the expected length of the collaboration that is required to get in, let's call it the warm-up phase, that it's usually neglected. There are studies, controlled studies of teams that were put together with different backgrounds for things like hackathons, but they were given like, okay, but the first 15 minutes is just getting to know each other before you jump into the planning, and just even if do something like introduce it to each other beyond just like, I am this, my department is that, and I have done this. Go a little bit beyond, like say, what's your favorite sport? Like something that reveals a little bit more about yourself. And that directive of just 15 minutes to get to know each other translated to more efficiency and more ideas and better solutions by the end of the hackathon, even though they had the same time as the ones that were told like go straight into the problem solving. So it is a factor that it by time is, yes, it's going to take a chunk of your project that may feel like, oh, you're just spinning wheels, but actually you're warming up to being able to take off. When that part is neglected, then you have a lot of mistakes and other hurdles down the line affecting the collaboration and the project.
I wanted to pick up on something that Laura mentioned in her introduction and ask her, based on this model, what's the most significant culture or mindset gap that you face in fostering collaboration amongst your various coworkers?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So I would say the biggest mindset gap that we have is varying priorities and pathways to reaching common goals. And this can manifest in a number of ways. It can be usually in future thinking versus status quo thinking. We have a variety of leaders from across the nation in our organization, and some of them may think, we've been doing it the same way for 40 years, why do we need to change it? Whereas others are thinking of new ways to capture new business, new ways to serve our clients, new ways to communicate with them and increase our touch points with them. And so sometimes with those varying priorities, we face a little bit of a clash in terms of how much time or qualified resources we should be putting towards those common goals. Usually we don't have, it doesn't get too bloody or ugly in terms of collaborating, but it's all about getting back to what those goals are, how we can best reach them. And again, there's that trust, synergy, collaboration, and communication that's really required to get back to letting people get to that expert team status.
Thank you.
Thank you. What has been your the hurdle that you think you would be able to get past, Laura, with some of these new knowledge or just reinforced knowledge?
I think that this session has really helped me to think about my own gaps in thinking, and especially I'm a very creative, marketing-minded, people-minded person. And so I have the most difficulty connecting with people who are more like scientists and data related. So trying to think about their perspectives and how they communicate and what their goals are. That's my main takeaway from this session.
Yeah, excellent. My mission is done here.
Steve, you had a question?
Thank you.
Yeah, if that's okay.
Sure, sure.
So again, I've been trying to integrate some of the things here, and I think that some of it works and doesn't work depending upon, number one, team size. So the smaller the teams have very different dynamics than larger teams. The decision, who's the decision maker? Is it being pushed down, or is there if you will, somebody at the top who's making the decisions, and how that then affects the team dynamics? And I don't think that necessarily, if you know everybody or you work longer on a team, that the team can get more functional. Sometimes it gets less functional because everybody goes into their corner. So maybe you can address any of those issues.
If the illness, so to speak, comes from bad organizational structures or inadequate support from leadership, it's going to be very hard to get it straightened out. It can help there are ways to manage from the bottom, as they say, but it's going to be a factor of the personality and the type of leadership that is influencing the collaboration. And you are right, there are times that people just go into their corners, but that means that the setup for the collaboration was crooked from the beginning. The way to straighten it out would be to, in a way, reset or bring in some new, in a way, new blood to rebalance the dynamics. I am going through that right now in one of the companies that I work with, in which my role is just to be the rebalancing act of 3 departments that have settled in their ways and are in their corner, but they very much all want to have new ways forward, and they required a 4th team to come along, join the collaboration effort, and be like, okay, this is how y'all are gonna work together. We're gonna be the referee a little bit for a while, and then we're all gonna be working together once we reset this bad habit that you established for the past 3 years. Question. Yes, Sean? Well, I
No, go
read the
ahead.
question.
So question, a tight timeline almost ensures that teams will always be chosen for instant gratification, and hence diversity of thought will be avoided. The commitment to innovation has to be emphasized upfront by the champion sent up the team. Do you agree?
Yes, if the point of the collaboration is to go for innovation, either incremental or radical. If it's just to go fix a problem, if it's just to troubleshoot, it is okay to not have the ideal world level of diversity of thought. But you will need to be very clear about the focus on troubleshooting and a certain open-mindedness that it's not about finding culprits, because that can be the one of the issues when you put a team together to just go and fix one thing or accomplish the one goal, is that friction starts to happen because somebody feels that they're going to get pointed at, this person was at fault for the problem. And it's more of, and it should be more of a, everybody is sitting on the same side of the table looking at the problem. It's not looking at each other as, who's the problem in this room? And that can be very subtle, but it can make a huge difference on how people approach the collaboration and the issue itself.
Terry, this is a question for Perry West. I know you've put a number of teams of experts together in your consulting practice. How does the model that Alex is outlining here compared with approaches that you've used to kind of put teams together?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think we always start out with teams of experts, and I agree with Alex. You have to work through a few projects with these people to learn how they work, what they can contribute, before you start to get that meshing effect that you can support each other. So I was thinking back this. I was also thinking that in a lot of cases, when I go to work for clients, I'm really becoming part of their team. Whether they're experts or not is sometimes a question. But you nevertheless are teaming with clients, and you'd like to leave them with a more expert team than you found them. That would be good. I was also thinking back to a project many years ago at a company. We had a system that needed to be developed, and management wasn't doing anything, and there were myself and two other senior engineers at the time, and we were too busy, any of us, to take the lead on the project. We just sat down together as a group of experts who knew each other and who were able to mesh. This is the thing, we'd worked together for several years, so we had a lot of these steps that you'd have to go through ordinarily were already fulfilled. And we just decided to do the project, and we decided who would do which part of the project, and proceeded. So it was a cooperative effort rather than a collaborative effort. There's a difference there in that. We decided who'd do what, and we cooperated with each other in doing it, but we didn't collaborate a lot on our own parts. And I think the getting to the teamwork part requires you to progress on to the collaboration phase, where you're actually interacting, and the team as a unit, is a single entity, not a group of individuals doing their parts. So I don't know if that helps any, Sean.
Help me. I like the distinction between cooperation and collaboration. I'll let Alex.
That is totally correct, and in agreement. That on research, on experience, and even in expertise, that there is a threshold that you cross between coordination, cooperation, and collaboration. It's a gradient in a way, and how much you interact with each other, and how much input you require from each is what grades that. Carl, do you have a question? Raise hand.
Yeah, I do. Perry just triggered off something in me, what I've noticed. I don't know what to call it, the death knell of a project, when there's a serious goal not being met, and the team gathers together to try to solve the problem. And I don't know what the right terminology would be, but they don't collaborate very well. They get into a lot of blaming and whatever, reviewing the past, like who cares, right? But I may be able to see that, but a lot of the others cannot let go of that. Anyway, what in that environment, what part of your model would work best?
For that one, that requires a broker because there are points or situations in which the baggage, the grievances are a big obstacle. Sometimes you just have to dissolve the team and say like, okay, so you can't work together, you're not gonna work together. And other times, like the case that I am handling right now, it's the grievances are not so bad that people don't want to work together, but they are big enough that that's what everybody focuses on. And my team is coming in to be like, okay, let's refocus this. I hear you that you are mad because of this. I hear you that you are still pondering about why they didn't do this thing 3 months ago. It's in the books now, but let's focus on, we can agree on X, Y, and Z. Let's focus on those. And once we get those out of the way, you're going to feel more motivated to work together. A little bit the approach of agreed upon pilot projects or quick wins. It's recommended in those cases with a knowledgeable, respected third party by both sides to be doing that navigating. Almost like a marriage counselor, so to speak.
Can I comment on that?
Please.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, so I would say, Alex, it comes down to, as Carl was saying, if you have a discussion of basically sort of the shared trust, if people don't have a shared plan, or there isn't integrity, or there isn't trust, or that, you know, something's wrong, and it boils down to a sort of a binary decision, like, was the plan sane? Was the plan rational? Did we all agree? Was the plan coherent? Did everybody do what they said they would do, or at least make an honest best effort to do that? And the answer is pretty much yes or no. And if the answer is no, maybe the problem is removing a person, maybe the problem is planning was out the window, people aren't communicating. And there are two different scenarios. And as Carl was saying, you can vaporize an entire team culture, trust, everything, if you make the wrong decision. But you have to call a spade a spade. Sometimes the idea was good, people tried, they made an honest best effort, and it just didn't work. That happens. But sometimes somebody just isn't contributing, or something destructive happened, or the trust level isn't there, or something like that. That's my experience.
You know, humans will be humans. It's not a
Well, I'm
having
trying to say though, if the issue is trust and the issue is communication, there's no point in discussing the timeline or the color of paper we wrote on. Like, if the issue is like, Department A said that Group A said they would deliver MVP X in this time frame to this department, and it didn't happen. Like, okay, guys, what's going on? And you have to deal with you can't dance around the
Yes.
issue, that sort of issue.
Yes, but sometimes there are cases where the trust was broken or took a beating because of a badly communicated expectation or goal or other type of misalignment.
Yes.
The one department not trusting the other on timelines was probably because one department thinks that the thing can be done in 2 months. The other department knew that it couldn't be done outside of 6. And somebody said, oh, let's get it done in 4 months.
Sure.
And then when it didn't happen in 4 months, everybody is angry that the timeline was not met. But and everybody is distrustful of the others.
I would say, like, in engineering, like the hardware software, like you make a trade-off. Like, the rational thing is you go back. You don't just sit there for 6 months and not deliver. You go back to the customer and say, we, or the other group, would say, like, we have to compromise this, and this. You know, the power, the functional integrity, these features have to go. If you want it in 2 months, here's the cut list of what's going to go, and here's the nice to have list. Are you okay with that? And there's a sort of like a constant bilateral, you know, feedback, monitoring. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like there's a difference between the strategic plan and the tactical plan. And the tactical should have ground rules to resolve conflict, but the strategic plan has the big overview of where you want to get to. And if you don't have that foundation from the get-go, you're in trouble.
Yep.
Absolutely. Let me get Perry in here. Perry, you had your hand raised?
Yes, I did, Sean. I just was thinking about the context of this, of teams and the culture of teams. And I'm thinking the teams exist within a larger organization. And it may even be within an industry. And sometimes the organization just doesn't give you the cultural ability to build a good functioning team. I remember back a long time ago, I won't say how many decades, I worked at Fairchild Semiconductor when there was such a company. And I was very disappointed in the culture of the company. I was recruited to go to National Semiconductor, and I went over for an interview, looked around, and I said, gee, I'm seeing all the cultural problems that bother me at Fairchild are here at National. So there's no point in my changing jobs into that other culture, because I'm going to be just as frustrated as I am in my current job. And that's when I looked outside the semiconductor industry at that time. So I think you have to look in the context of which this team exists and say, can we even make a high performance team within this cultural environment?
Alex, any final remarks before we wrap?
No, that's absolutely correct. That's why the levels of individual, collective, organizational, or institutional, and then the ecology that includes that industry. That culture is the basis of how everything will function or dysfunction. And getting a good grasp of it and having a one that is functional can go a long way to getting everything else in line. So
Well,
thanks for sharing, Perry.
On that happy note, I'm going to send everybody off to their next Zoom call. Thanks for coming this morning.
Thanks, everyone.